All right, Drew. Thanks a lot for coming and sitting down with us today. So I know you're back in town from, where did you say? Where
Long Island at Republic
Long Island.
Airport.
What are you doing up there?
Instructing at a 141 school for a professional pilot program. It's part of the State University of New York. It's a SUNY school. So, yep, been instructing there. Just got my double I, and hopefully applying to a regional soon.
Awesome. Congrats on the double I.
Thanks.
Can you give us a little insight on how you got started flying and kind of your path that you chose to go down?
Yep. My first flight was actually with my cousin who got his private pilot's license. After that, I've been hooked ever since. So I got some flight lessons after that. My dad asked me, is this something you really want to do? And yeah, I got some flight lessons after that. Started flying with a small FBO at Republic Airport, the same one that I'm teaching at right now. And eventually got into a vocational program for a high school that I attended in Long Island. It was called Barry Tech. Essentially what that was half a day, every day of the week, of you going to this other school to do an aviation operations course. And part of the course was not only a ground school to teach you, and get you prepared for the private pilot written test, but also they gave us flight lessons on the side for free as part of the vocational program. I guess what they did was they just used money that would have been directed toward your home school and allowed that funding to provide, the flight lessons. That was really beneficial. I got like 25, 26 hours from that program. Got right up until just about before my license. And that was when I came down to Florida at Embry-Riddle and finished up my private pilot's license and finished up the majority of my ratings up through multi-commercial.
Nice.
Yeah, so I decided to do the college route and, get a degree because I really wanted the college experience too. I thought that was important. I didn't want to just get my flight ratings and then, decide to go on and work for somebody from there. So Embry-Riddle I thought was a really good fit for me, and that's why I chose Embry-Riddle. I mean, amongst other obvious reasons, the quality of the education and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's what I chose. There are a lot of different other paths to take, I guess, but that was the one that I chose.
Nice. And so how long have you been flight instructing now over at SUNY?
I got hired there in October of this past October. So yeah, since then I've picked up probably about 400 hours.
Nice.
Yep.
What do you fly over there?
We have mainly Warriors, Piper Warriors, Cessna 172s, a couple 152s that we do our spin training with. And a Seminole and Arrows for the complex for students to do their commercial ratings and get their complex endorsements.
What do you feel is or on another note, what do you feel is the hardest thing for, a new private pilot to kind of get down and really understand?
I think the amount of work that it's going to take outside of flying lessons to get you where you need to be. A lot of people think that just by virtue of taking flight lessons that you are doing everything that you need to do in order to get your license. But, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes study time and ground prep that you need to put into it in order to have the knowledge that it's going to take in order to pass a private pilot check ride. And not only for passing a check ride, but knowledge that you need to know anyway, to become a safe pilot. And, I think that goes by the wayside a little bit, and that's why it's so important to do like a 141 program, at a college or university, whatever it may be, because you do get ground school courses that reinforce all of that knowledge that you need to know anyway. I think that's really important. Other than that, I think that the flying comes fairly easily. So that's not really the problem. I'd say the main issue is the ground knowledge, mostly.
And if you had to go over to the flying side of it, what would you say that students have the hardest time either understanding or getting down, or really?
A lot of people initially almost have a fear of flying itself. They want to take flying lessons, but they're not necessarily comfortable with being in an airplane and doing all the maneuvers in an airplane yet. Like air sickness, for example. I've seen some students will have a propensity to get air sick. If they haven't really flown in a small airplane before, they're really gung-ho about it initially, but then, that starts to inhibit training, I would say. Other than that, I would say ground reference maneuvers are pretty tough for students to get down.
Can you explain to, somebody who might not really know what a ground reference maneuver is?
Ground reference maneuvers are flying the airplane over a predetermined track over the ground, and you adjust the airplane's flight path based upon the wind. So, for example, we have a maneuver where we call turns around a point, where you would fly a circular path around a point on the ground and adjust for different wind conditions. So you predetermine your path and adjust for the given wind correction for that day. Other than that, the air maneuvers I think are fairly easy to grasp. Some students do have a little bit of a fear of the stalls. Stalls are really not a big deal at all. We practice them so that the students are comfortable with flying the airplane in all phases of flight. Stalls are basically, when the airplane ceases to stop producing lift and the nose will come down and you execute a certain recovery maneuver. Doing those for the first few times can be a little bit uncomfortable for a student. They don't really understand what a stall fully is, but we like to develop that into, by the time that you have your private, or I should say by the time you solo the airplane, that you really have a very good fundamental understanding of what a stall is. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, so Drew, can you kind of explain to us, some of the different paths that you could take, for somebody who's first starting out as an individual who really wants to get involved in flying? What are the different options that they have?
Well, I think that you really need to determine whether or not flying is a hobby or if flying is something that you want to make a career. I think the divide there is really whether or not you'd like to go to an FBO. An FBO stands for Fixed Base Operator, which would be a flight school based at an airport. So they'll have a flight school and do flight training, what we call Part 61. They operate under a certain part of the federal aviation regulations that we call Part 61. This is pretty much for all the FBOs. This is all the smaller end type flight training. I think if you'd like to make aviation a hobby, I would definitely recommend a Part 61 school, where it's kind of more learn as much as you want on your own schedule. There's not any kind of fixed structured program. It's kind of like if you would like to take flight lessons on Tuesday and Saturday, then you can do that. If you want to take a lesson on Friday and that's it, you can do that. Your home study is at your own pace, and there's really no, like I said before, kind of structured environment there. But I would say that if you would like to take aviation kind of to the next level and make it a career, then I would say definitely look into Part 141 programs or 142 programs, such as SUNY Farmingdale, the place that I work at in New York, or Embry-Riddle, or University of North Dakota, are also great programs. All have professional pilot programs, and really give you the opportunity to then get maybe, let's say, a minor to supplement your degree in your professional pilot course. A lot of people don't really think about it, but the military is also a great route to take, because a lot of from what I've seen, the GIs have access to the GI Bill after they get out of the service, and then the GI Bill will then pay for their college degree, a lot of their flight training, and they've put in the time, and now they have a good financial base, and they haven't had to invest a whole lot of money into the let's say 141 program for a degree, which is definitely a big factor for a lot of people. These universities, while they provide great flight training, are extremely expensive. Flight training is not cheap at all. So I'd say that's one of the biggest barriers to aviation, to getting into aviation, is the financial aspect of it, of really being able to say, hey, how am I going to be able to finance this? Because a private pilot's license will typically, take between $5,000 and $10,000, depending upon how well you progress through the course. Now that's just a private pilot's license. If you're looking at, let's say, to get all your ratings to become a professional pilot, you're going to need not only a private pilot's license, but an instrument rating down the road, and then eventually a commercial rating and or multi-engine ratings, depending upon what you're doing. So you do have to figure that, from the outset, is, hey, how am I going to finance this? Because all too often you see people who are progressing steadily, they're doing really well, but then they run into a financial barrier. And the thing with aviation is that repetition is your friend. You need to be able to fly on a very consistent basis. You can't kind of have the money one day, run out of money, take 2-3 weeks off, and then pick it up again. It's very hard to do that. It'll really inhibit your progress. So make sure that before you go into it, you have a very good idea of how much money you do have to spend and the time frame in which you can spend it. It's definitely really important. I would tell anybody, entering the aviation background to do. Aside from, but getting back to your question, Part 61 is, like I said, your FBOs, your kind of mom and pop flight schools. If you're just doing a private pilot's license and maybe an instrument rating. And then I would say if you're getting into the professional aspect of it, definitely Part 141, or go into the military and get some sort of aviation background first. There are schools out there aside from universities. There are other pilot schools that are just geared toward creating professional pilots. ATP is definitely a really good route to take. ATP will offer you the ability to get all your ratings up through flight instructor. And eventually, they have, I believe, a co-chair agreement with some regional airlines to get you an interview. And kind of like a foot in the door into these regionals to at least get an interview,
Right.
and get yourself familiar with the airline. Whether or not you get hired then is, obviously a different story, but ATP is definitely a really good place. Trying to think of any other ones. Delta Flight Academy, I believe, is in Orlando. I know that they have a professional pilot course too. I'm sure all these places have websites that you can go and check out, the cost and kind of the structure of how your flight training is going to take place.
Right.
I think that about pretty much covers about 98% of how pilots get trained.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Drew, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Any last closing words for an individual, looking into getting their license?
I would say just study.
Study.
Study, yeah, definitely. All the ground time that you put in on your own will pay dividends financially, for sure. Things that you won't have to spend time paying an instructor for, things that you can do on your own once they're explained to you, and the studying that you can do on your own will really, really help you down the road.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Drew.
Yeah, no
Appreciate it.
problem.